الصوت. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. النهاردة الاثنين 13 مارس 2023، وكالعادة وكما دائما أذكر فضل الله علي فإني لم أبحث عن هذه الأعمال التي أقدمها، لكن شيء عجيب جدا أني أجد هذه الأشياء أمامي. يمكن ده نظرا للتكنولوجيا الفائقة التي أصبح عليها الإنترنت باستخدامه الخوارزميات نسبة إلى الخوارزم، وده اسم هيذكره دكتور روي كاساجراندا بشدة في الفيديو بتاعه اللي الحمد لله رب العالمين اللي بعرضه النهارده. متأسف، يمكن يجي في الجزء الأول ده أو يجي اسمه اللي هو الخوارزمي في الجزء الثاني، لأن أعتقد مش هقدر أعرض الفيديو بتاع دكتور كاساجراندا اللي قدامنا ده كاملا النهارده. لكنه زي ما قلت انا قبل كده قلت على دكتور جيفري لانج انه دي كانت منحة من الله ان انا شفت الفيديوهات بتاعته، لكن ايضا هذه منحة اعتقد اكبر من الله سبحانه وتعالى ان يطلعني على مثل هذه الاعمال. لو قلت الرائعة يبقى كويس، لو قلت الجميلة يبقى كويس، لو قلت الفائقة الروعة يبقى أحسن، لو قلت التي ليس لها مثيل يبقى أحسن وأحسن وأحسن. تعال عشان نختصر الوقت شوية نخش في الموضوع. النهاردة بقدم لك عمل رائع جدا 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 من وجهة نظري فوق الوصف، وبحتار الراجل ده بيقف ساعتين اتنين يلقي محاضرة باللغة الإنجليزية في مركز هيوستن، ولفضل الله أيضا إن أنا رحت هيوستن وعشت في هذه المدينة هيوستن حوالي أسبوع تقريبا في تكساس، في ولاية تكساس الأمريكية. مدينة هيوستن مش العاصمة، العاصمة دالاس، لكن هيوستن هي أكبر مدينة في ولاية تكساس، وأنا قعدت فيها وفي الجامعة، جامعة ساذرن يونيفرسيتي، وفي كوليدج ستيشن حوالي أسبوع تقريبا سنة 1993. وكان ده من ضمن بعثة ما بعد الدكتوراه إلى الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. وكان لي شرف إن أنا صليت أظن جمعة في تكساس، وحضرت في أحد المساجد تقريبا مسجد الجامعة، مسجد جامعة ساذرن يونيفرسيتي، تكساس ساذرن يونيفرسيتي، واستمعت إلى خطيب أمريكي زنجي أسود يعني، وهو بيعتلي المنبر وماسك العصاية تقليدا لحضرة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، ومخضب لحيته بالحناء، ويرتدي العمامة والجلباب، وحاجة رائعة جدا جدا جدا. دكتور روي كاساجراندا هيقدم لنا نموذج جديد، ما اعرفش هو أسلم ولا لا، لكن هو بيقدم لنا حاجة رائعة جدا، استقراء أو قراءة رائعة جدا جدا للحضارة العربية الإسلامية، وكيف أنقذت الحضارة الغربية. هنشوف العنوان ده دلوقتي بتاعه، بس تعالى نشوف العنوان بتاعي والكفر بتاعي اللي قدامك دلوقتي. دكتور كاساجراندا بالإنجليزي فوق وبالعربي تحت، دكتور كاساجراندا. والمحاضرة بتاعته أنا سميتها كيف أنقذت الحضارة العربية الإسلامية العالم من براثن الحضارة الغربية المدمرة، دكتور عبد الله البلتاجي، 13/23/23. هو كان عنوان المحاضرة بتاعته How Islam Saved Western Civilization. كيف أن الإسلام، مش الحضارة العربية ولا الحضارة العربية الإسلامية، لكن الإسلام نفسه أنقذ الحضارة الغربية. عنوان رائع جدا فوق، هو مختصر العنوان بتاعه بطريقة رائعة جدا. How Islam Saved Western Civilization. كيف أن الإسلام أنقذ الحضارة الغربية. أنا حولت هذا العنوان إلى العنوان اللي قدامك ده، كيف أنقذت الحضارة العربية الإسلامية العالم من براثن الحضارة الغربية المدمرة. وده دكتور روي كاساجراندا، وهو بيلقي المحاضرة بتاعته لا بيقف على منصة ولا بيقف ولا بيقعد خلف مكتب ولا بيقعد على كرسي، بيلقي المحاضرة بتاعته وهو ماشي وبيشاور بإيديه وبتاع، ولا قدامه دوكيومنت ولا قدامه أي حاجة، وبيلقي المحاضرة بتاعته خلال ساعتين مثلا يستعرض فيها مثلا تاريخ 6000 سنة. شيء عظيم جدا، لأنه هو أستاذ في التاريخ والدراسات السياسية والفلسفة. فأنا أقول إن هو أستاذ فلسفة تاريخ السياسة، يعني برضه عشان أختصر، هو أستاذ في الجامعة الأمريكية أستاذ فلسفة تاريخ السياسة، أو فلسفة تاريخ السياسة يبقى أحسن، لأن هو بيتكلم على 3 محاور: الفلسفة والتاريخ والسياسة، ال3 مع بعض. وهنا تحت اهو دكتور روي كاساجراندا باشز بلاك اجينست ذا. هنشوف دلوقتي في العنوان بتاع الفيديو لما نجيب. وهنا انا كاتب كيف انقذت الحضارة العربية الإسلامية الإنسانية من براثن الحضارة الغربية المدمرة، دكتور عبد الله البلتاجي، 13/23/23. وده اللي انا شيرته على الفيسبوك على صفحتي. تعال بقى نروح للموضوع عشان ما نطولش اكتر من كده، واوريك الاول اهو ده صفحتي على الفيسبوك اهي، صفحتي دكتور عبد الله البلتاجي على الفيسبوك. طبعا بتشرف ان انا حاطط على صدر الصفحة دائما قبر الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم بالمدينة المنورة، وده من 12/3/2022، يعني من اكتر من سنة بيوم. 13/3/2023. الفيديو بتاعنا اهو تحتيه اللي هو دكتور كاساجراندا بيتكلم عن How Islam Saved Western Civilization. دكتور روي كاساجراندا pushes back against the artificial East West. مش هنشوفها دلوقتي في العنوان بتاع المحاضرة من الفيديو. ادي الفيديو اهو بيقول دكتور روي كاساجراندا pushes back against the artificial East West paradigm and show how the so-called Dark Ages was in fact a period with enormous intellectual achievement. حاجة رائعة جدا الحقيقة الكلام بتاعه. بيقول ان دكتور روي كاساجراندا بيدفع للخلف ضد المقولة الصناعية بتاعت الصراع بين الشرق والغرب، and show how the so-called dark ages، وبيوضح ويبين كيف أن ما سمي بالعصور المظلمة was in fact كان في الحقيقة a period of enormous intellectual achievement. كانت ما كانش عصور مظلمة، ولكن كانت period فترة من الإنجازات العقلية الرائعة الهائلة. أنا مش هكمل أكتر من كده عشان هضطر إن أنا أخش للفيديو بتاعنا. هنا لما عملت البحث على دكتور روي كاساجراندا بعد ما شفت الفيديو بتاعه، ما كنتش أعرفه الحقيقة، فبعد ما شفت الفيديو بتاعه رحت على جوجل وقلت اشوف مين روي كاساجراندا، فعندنا 185 ألف نتيجة عن دكتور روي كاساجراندا بالعربي وبالانجليزي على على باحث جوجل. وبعدين هنا بقى جبت بعض الاشياء عنه اهو about الصفحه دي about روي كاساجراندا. الصفحه دي الصفحه التعريفيه بتاعه دكتور روي كاساجراندا. وهنا البحث بالعربي عن روي كاساجراندا، روي كاساجراندا. فجايب له فيديوهات كتيره جدا وجايب له صفحات كتيره جدا. جبت لك منها اظن صفحه او اتنين. دي صفحه بتتكلم على كيف أنقذ الإسلام الحضارة الغربية، روي كاساجراندا. تقدر تقرأ المقال وتشوف الفيديوهات وحاجة رائعة، وهحط لك طبعا الروابط دي على الفيديو. وهنا أيضا روي كاساجراندا على يو اس عرب، الموقع ده بتاع صوت العرب في أمريكا، بيقول فيه إنه في بروفيسور أمريكي يثير تفاعلا كبيرا بمحاضرة عن عبقرية خالد بن الوليد العسكري. وبرضه حاطط لك الصفحة دي، وفي صفحات كتيرة جدا جدا جدا. مش هكتر اكتر من كده، وهاخدك بقى على الفيديو بتاعنا بتاع النهارده.
To start, I actually want to start by admitting something, which is, so the title of this talk is How Islam Saved Western Civilization. For the record, I believe that is a totally accurate statement. There's nothing, this isn't an attempt to back away from that title at all. The thing I want to admit is the title of this talk is How Islam Saved Western Civilization. I have nested a contradiction in the title that I'm going to show you later on purpose, because I like to do things like that. It's just my nature. So I just want you to know I'm admitting this right off the start. So, to start this thing off though, I also want to admit something else, which is that I picked the title because there's a book that kind of inspired me. But the book is deeply flawed. And the book is How the Irish Saved Civilization. I got the book I want to say like 22 years ago, and I hate doing this because it feels like I'm picking on somebody, but the book is deeply flawed. It's riddled with two contradictions, in fact, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because those are some of the contradictions I want to tease out in this talk. So here's the premise of the book. On September 4, 476 AD, the Roman Empire collapsed. It was a very sad day. There was much lamenting. And then, the Irish saved civilization because the Irish had already converted to Christianity. And Christianity, of course, is the core of civilization. And so, the Irish went to Europe and converted those awful pagan Germanic tribesmen to Christianity and saved civilization in the process. That's wrong on multiple levels. The first and most obvious level is Rome didn't fall on September 4, 476 AD. So if the whole idea is that the Irish saved civilization from collapse, but it didn't collapse, then the premise is already shot out of the water. We're already in trouble. Rome fell May 29, 1453. It's almost 1,000 years later. This isn't a small error. This is a gigantic error. So that's one problem. Another problem with the premise is the following. Most of the Germanic tribesmen were Christian. So if the Irish are converting them to Christianity, that's To start, I actually want to start by admitting something, which is, so the title of this talk is How Islam Saved Western Civilization. For the record, I believe that is a totally accurate statement. There's nothing, this isn't an attempt to back away from that title at all. The thing I want to admit is the title of this talk is How Islam Saved Western Civilization. I have nested a contradiction in the title that I'm going to show you later on purpose, because I like to do things like that. It's just my nature. So I just want you to know I'm admitting this right off the start. So, to start this thing off, though, I also want to admit something else, which is that I picked the title because there's a book that kind of inspired me. But the book is deeply flawed. And the book is How the Irish Saved Civilization. I got the book, I want to say, like 22 years ago. And I hate doing this because I feel like it feels like I'm picking on somebody, but the book is deeply flawed. It's riddled with two contradictions, in fact. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because those are some of the contradictions I want to tease out in this talk. So here's the premise of the book. On September 4, 476 AD, the Roman Empire collapsed. It was a very sad day. There was much lamenting. And then the Irish saved civilization because the Irish had already converted to Christianity. And Christianity, of course, is the core of civilization. And so the Irish went to Europe and converted those awful pagan Germanic tribesmen to Christianity and saved civilization in the process. That's wrong on multiple levels. The first and most obvious level is Rome didn't fall on September 4, 476 AD. So if the whole idea is that the Irish saved civilization from collapse, but it didn't collapse, then the premise is already shot out of the water. We're already in trouble. Rome fell May 29, 1453. It's almost 1,000 years later. This is
سنة 1453 بعد ما يقرب من 1000 عام من اللي ادعاه هذا الكتاب اللي قراه. يعني الحتة دي مهمة جدا عشان تعرف التناقضات اللي بيقع فيها المسيحيين.
And saved civilization in the
الحكاية دي.
That's wrong on multiple levels. The first and most obvious level is Rome didn't fall on September 4, 476 AD.
سقطت في 4 سبتمبر سنة 446 ميلادية. لذا فإن كانت الفكرة بأكملها يا أن الحضارة الإيرلندية الآمنة.
So if the whole idea is that the Irish saved civilization from collapse, but it didn't collapse, then the premise is already shot out of the water. We're already. Now, when I mentioned Heron, I didn't say it. I almost said it, but I caught myself. I almost said he was a Greek from Alexandria, Egypt, at the Great Library and invented the steam engine. And the reason I caught myself is because of the identity thing, which I'm not done talking about. But before I move away from Heron, I just want to point out what he did. He made 2 steam engines, in fact. Into something a little bit more manageable, because if Rome had already was already to make it Christian, and there, like 80% of the Filipino collapsed. It was a very sad day. There was much lamenting. And then The Irish saved civilization because the Irish had already converted to Christianity. And Christianity, of course, is the core of civilization. And so the Irish went to Europe and converted those awful pagan Germanic tribesmen to Christianity and saved civilization in the process. That's wrong on multiple levels. The first and most obvious level is Rome didn't fall on September 4, 476.
لم تسقط في 4 سبتمبر 446 لكن
So if the whole idea is that the Irish saved civilization from collapse, but it didn't collapse, then the premise is already shot out of the water. We're already in trouble. Rome fell May 29, 1453. It's almost 1,000 years later. This isn't a small error. This is a gigantic error. So that's one problem. Another problem with the premise is the following. Most of the Germanic tribesmen were Christian. So if the Irish are converting them to Christianity, that's odd. It's like when President William McKinley said we're conquering the Philippines to make it Christian, and they're, like 80% of the Filipino population were Catholic. Of course, what McKinley meant was to make them Protestant. But anyway, that's a different.
بيحاول يفسر أعماله اللا أخلاقية بأنه اللي بيعمله ده بسبب الدين اللي هو الكاثوليكية المسيحية.
We're just going to genocide 800,000 of these folks and hopefully flip them over to Protestantism. Didn't work.
80 مليون 80 ألف عشان يحولوه إلى البروتستانتية.
The second contradiction that they were going to convert the Germanic tribesmen to Christianity is actually shockingly similar to the McKinley thing I just brought up.
لنفس الفكرة بتاعت ماكنلي ده.
Not all of the Germanic tribesmen had converted. Some of them were still pagan. But the ones that had converted were the wrong kind of Christian. That's what he really means. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine decided that Christianity was too unwieldy of a religion. It was too complicated, too mysterious. There were too many moving parts, and it needed to be toned down a little bit, in part to get rid of some of the contradictions. Like, for example, the Trinity. It was driving everybody nuts. Like, how does this work? He's what? And so Constantine said, I want 318 of you theologians to go to Nicaea and figure out how to make Christianity into something a little bit more manageable, because if Rome was already majority Christian at that point, if the Roman Empire is going to use Christianity as a state religion to manipulate people, we as the politician class need to be able to know what Christianity is. How can we manipulate people through religion if we don't understand the religion? So they get together at Nicaea. They come up with a solution for the Trinity. There were 30 Gospels.
اللي هو باسم الاب والابن والروح القدس اله واحد امين. هم الثلاثه دول مجمع نيقة جمعهم الثلاثه في اله واحد. ازاي ما تعرفش؟ هم ثلاثه اهم، هعمل على صوابع اهم. التسميه بتقول باسم الله الاب والابن والروح القدس. هم ثلاثه، الاب اللي هو الله، والابن المسيح، والروح القدس اللي هو نفخ الله به في مريم فأتت بيسوع المسيح عليه السلام. فده الثالوث المقدس اللي هو بيتكلم عنه.
They threw 26 away. They ordered them destroyed. It didn't quite work. We have the other 26. Most of them were found in Egypt by a farmer who was in the desert digging up phosphorus, and he hit a jar with his shovel, and he heard it crack.
التعرف على هذه الأشياء كان في فلاح مصري بيزرع الأرض بتاعته فبيضرب بالفاس في الأرض فلقى جرة، الجرة دي طلعها، فلما طلعها لقى فيها وثائق مسيحية.
And he pulled the jar out. And he saw these leather-bound books. I want to say it was 46, 47. And he pulls out the leather-bound books and he's like, I don't know what these are, but I know who will know. And he was Muslim, he went to the nearby church, the Coptic Orthodox church, and he handed them to the priest, and the priest went, oh, I know what these are. These are the 26 apocrypha.
قال ان دي ال 26 جلدية بتاعت ابو كريفة. انا على فكرة عايز اعمل توقف دلوقتي ضروري، لاني بقالي مدة بفكر ادور على ابو كريفة ده على جوجل واعرف ايه هو والتسمية دي جت منين.
And the church then immediately declared it.
هعمل ثواني باوس. فأنا جبت الأصفار أصفار أبو كريفة.
The miracle that somehow the 26.
أنا جبت أصفار أبو كريفة اهوت من على جوجل، ودي صفحة جوجل اللي دورت فيها على أبو كريفة، وجبت الويكيبيديا عن أبو كريفة. وأبو كريفة دي الأصفار الغير قانونية، يعني هم سموا مجموعة من الأصفار اللي ما اتفقش عليها رجال اليهود سموها بأصفار أبو كريفة التحريفية، سموها الأصفار التحريفية. وأنا هسيب لك على برضو الفيديو الصفحة بتاعت أبو كريفة على الويكيبيديا.
Apocrypha had survived, and the Coptic Church claims that all 30 Gospels are legit and rejects the rejection of the 26 Apocrypha. Apocrypha means wrong. Right. So it rejects the wrong, the declaration that they're wrong.
فهي مرفوضة لذلك.
At Nicaea, the 318 also had a conversation about one other problem. And the problem was how to understand Christ's nature on earth. If he was God, then how did he manage sin, for example? There was a guy named Arius of Alexandria. He was actually from Cyrenaica. Long story. He was living in Alexandria. That's where he made his career. Arius of Alexandria went, here's my suggestion. Jesus was God, pure God, total God. As a result, he was never tempted, done. No sin. But the majority said, no, that's wrong. Jesus was God in a man's body. The body was tempted. Therefore, he did experience what it would be like to be tempted, but because he was God, he overcame it, and there was no sin. That became Orthodox doctrine. The other part became heresy. It's known as the Arian heresy. Arian with an I. not a why.
والجزء الآخر اتكلم على
Is
المنطقة
areas
النارية
of Alexandria. Why is the horse people who conquered India and Ireland. That's the Arian heresy. It took off in Egypt. It took off in Syria. And the Germanic tribesmen really liked it. So that's what's being converted. They're being taken away from the Arian heresy into what we would have considered mainstream Christianity. Of course, in the United States, the average American Christian is an Arian heretic. I can prove it to you. There's a Greek guy who wrote a book called The Last Temptation of Christ. His name was Nikos Kazantzakis. The Last Temptation of Christ is Orthodox Christian belief. Christ was tempted as a man, but overcame it because he was God. Americans went nuts when Scorsese turned this into a movie. The French also went nuts. They actually set a historical movie theater on fire while people were in it, because they couldn't believe that a movie that could be this heretical could be made, when the reality was they were the heretics. That was the church's official belief.
وهذا كان المعتقد الرسمي للكنيسة.
I think that's hilarious. All right, fine.
أعتقد إن هذا مضحكا جدا.
These are the types of contradictions I want to tackle. Right, the assumptions that we go into these conversations with, like, oh, the Germanic tribesmen are pagans, and oh, right, and the reality is it's way more complicated. So, to do that, I want to start with a definition of Western civilization.
الغربية.
I've covered this before in other lectures, but I have to treat every lecture like a standalone. So if you've heard me before, forgive me for any redundancy. I will try not to focus too much on this particular definition, just because I've covered it in other lectures, but I still need to do this. So, if you take a college level course, Intro to Western Civilization, and for the record, I'm a political scientist, but history is obviously a thing of mine, and I did teach for a few years with the University of Maryland, University College, and I did teach their Intro to Western Civilization class. So I'm also telling you this as a person, as a recovering Intro to Civilization professor. Usually, every school is probably a little bit different because it depends on the textbook and the professor, but usually the class starts in 5,400 BC, 3,400 BC, or if you're like me and you reject BC because it's confusing, 5,400 years ago. And then, the class usually goes, it depends again on the text and the professor, but it usually goes to 1648 with the end of the 30 Years' War, which didn't end in 1648 and lasted about 50 years, just for the record. So just to make things not work.
اللي هي كانت ما بين البروتستانت والكاثوليك، يعني انا تقريبا فاهم كده حرب
التسليح دي كانت ما بين Intro to Western Civ 2 usually starts in 1648 and goes to the present.
الويسترن civilization,
which I've always thought was remarkable because it shows our bias for the contemporary period, because we're going to take 5,000 years of history 5,400 years ago to 400 years ago, and we're going to compress that into 16 weeks, and then we're going to do 3.5 centuries in 16 weeks. It seems like an unfair distribution. We're literally giving the recent centuries 17 times the attention that we gave the old centuries. But okay, set that aside for a moment. Odds are good that your professor will start this class with maybe one, maybe two, but probably one lecture on Mesopotamia and Sumer and the beginning of writing. And then maybe the second lecture will briefly cover Egypt. And then from there, your professor is going to probably go on and spend a huge amount of time on the Greeks, an enormous amount of time on the Romans, and then the Middle Ages kick in, maybe a lecture on the Middle Ages. They lasted 1,000 years, maybe it gets a lecture. And then there'll be a lecture or two at the end of the class, because the Italians go, hey, I have an idea, let's do the Renaissance, and that's a really exciting time period. And then the class ends with the completion of the 30 Years' War, when Protestants and Catholics slaughter each other wholesale in Europe. The 30 Years' War is one of my favorite wars because Spain and Sweden fight each other. You know what I mean? There's just, you almost don't need to know anything else about the war. They fought 3 battles in Germany. The Spanish army and the Swedish army met in Germany, and they beat the crap out of each other. For the record, the Swedes, while they were in Germany, plundered it. So did the Spanish, of course. You're in Germany, come on, of course you're going to plunder. And they stole a bunch of stuff from the city of Würzburg, and they took it back to Sweden, and a bunch of that ended up in museums. Anything else about the war? They fought 3 battles in Germany. The Spanish army and the Swedish army met in Germany, and they beat the crap out of each other. For the record, the Swedes, while they were in Germany, plundered it. So did the Spanish, of course. You're in Germany, come on, of course you're going to plunder. And they stole a bunch of stuff from the city of Würzburg, and they took it back to Sweden, and a bunch of that ended up in museums. And the city of Würzburg a few years ago sued Sweden to get their stuff.
ورفعت مدينة ويرسبيرغ قبل بضع سنوات دعوى قضائية ضد السويد لاستعادة الأغراض التي تم سرقتها من أثناء هذه الحرب سنة 1648. يا جماعة، عشان إيه؟ خدوا بالكم من الغرض من المحاضرة، إن هو الإسلام أنقذ العالم من الحضارة الغربية. أهو ده اللي كانوا الحضارة الغربية بيعملوه ببعض. السويد لما دخلت ألمانيا في مدينة ويرسبيرغ سنة 1648 نهبوا المدينة وخدوا محتويات المتاحف إلى السويد. فالسويد بترفع ألمانيا بترفع دعوة ضد السويد لاستعادة المسروقات اللي سرقها المسيحيين اللي زيهم اللي غزوا ألمانيا. لأن أعتقد يعني في الحتة دي إن السويديين معرفش هم اللي كانوا الكاثوليك ولا البروتستانت، والألمان هم اللي كانوا العكس. إذا كان السويديين كانوا هم الكاثوليك يبقى الألمان كانوا هم البروتستانت، وإذا كان السويديين هم البروتستانت يبقى الألمان هم الكاثوليك. وفي كلتا الحالتين السويديين اللي هاجموا مدينة ويرزنبرج في ألمانيا سنة 1648 واستباحوها وسرقوا محتويات المتاحف وودوها في السويد. فألمانيا بتطالب باستعادة
stuff back from 1648 and the European Union went, no, sorry, too bad you lost.
والاتحاد الأوروبي آسفا مش قادر يعمل هذه الحكاية. ان هو دلوقتي في 2023 الاتحاد الأوروبي مش قادر يوصل لهذه النتيجة انه ألمانيا تستعيد المسروقات بتاعتها من السويد اللي اتسرقت بواسطة مسيحيين زيهم سنة 1648. دي حاجة شيء
wow. Why, you ask? Well, because
لماذا تسأل؟ لأنه إذا كان
Stockholm had returned to Würzburg its plundered goods, then Berlin and London would have to return to Egypt and Iraq its plunder.
شفتوا؟ فيجب على ألمانيا إن هي تعيد مسرقته من إيران والعراق. مش ممكن ما إلى مصر والعراق أقصد. فيجب أن تعود إلى مصر تعيد إلى مصر والعراق ما نهبته. فقد نهبت البضائع التي كان من الممكن أن تكون حدثا كارثيا في المتاحف.
That would have been a catastrophic event for museums in Europe. Right? One of my favorite museums on the planet is the Pergamon Museum. It's in Berlin. If you love anything to do with the Middle East, it is amazing.
فالأشياء المتعلقة فيه بالشرق الأوسط أشياء amazing مذهلة.
That the Germans took.
فالألمان في برلين لديهم معبد يوناني كامل استولى عليه الألمان أثناء طبعا يمكن الحرب العالمية الأولى أو الثانية. ولديهم البوابات البابلية كاملة اللي خدوها من العراق كاملة. فإذا كنتوا عايزين تستعيدوا المسروقات بتاعتكم من السويد فأعيدوا المسروقات المصرية والعراقية إلى مصر والعراق.
Took out of Turkey stone by stone.
حجرا حجرا.
The gates of Babylon.
عندهم
الأحجار
البابل
stone by stone,
and they
erected it inside a building specifically constructed to have these two marbles inside. And in a way, I'm grateful because you can go see it. They're intact, they're preserved. In a way, I'm horrified because these weren't German national treasures. I have actually been to the Temple of Pergamon that's in Berlin, in Turkey. I've been to Pergamon. And there's like you know where it is. Like, wow, so I've been to both. I've seen where it's supposed to be and I've seen where it is. The reason why I'm bringing up the class is because nested in it is a really interesting admission and then a massive omission. The admission is that Western civilization started on the banks of the Euphrates, the Tigris, and the Nile, and then they're never talked about again. That's it. Cover it for a week. And then in the next 31 weeks, we're going to talk about how amazing European civilization really was. Now, obviously European civilization is amazing. I mean, I'm after all speaking a European language in North America. You don't get here and conquer two whole continents with at least not having a really strong propensity to violence. You know what I mean? There has to be something there. It didn't just happen.
كيف أن هذا قد حدث؟
I'm 0% Native American. 23andMe broke my heart. I was really hoping I could have my little dances with wolves fantasy. No. So,
ماذا فعل الأمريكيين الأوروبيين بالأمريكيين الأصليين اللي هم الهنود الحمر؟ لقد أبادوا عدة ملايين.
So it's not to reject that there doesn't need to be a story about Europe. It's to wonder about the question. Wait a minute. He started in Sumer. Now, I wouldn't have started in Sumer for a different reason. I'm a political scientist. I'm not a historian. Historians started in Sumer because 5,400 years ago is when they mostly agreed. There's a little bit of disagreement. That's when writing started. What a historian is, they're different from a political scientist. A historian believes that civilization starts with writing because a historian is a literary critic who does non-fiction. The difference between a historian and an English major is English majors do fiction, historians do non-fiction. So if there isn't something written, there's nothing for historians to talk about. I, on the other hand, don't care about that. The only thing I care about is politics. So, I think government starts civilization, not writing. In fact,
الحضارة في أي مكان في العالم بدأت من الكتابة. فلماذا حدثت الكتابة في المقام
الأول؟ What happened was bureaucrats were trying to figure out how to keep track of how many cows they had, how much wheat they had stored in the granaries, how many swords they had, how many horses they had, and they the politician class went to the bureaucrats and said, you need to come up with some mechanism to keep track of all of this. And so the bureaucrats began coming up with symbol sets for numbers and for items, and over time those symbol sets evolved into writing. In other words, government had to come first. The year is 6,264, according to the ancient Egyptian calendar. At some point, an ancient Egyptian politician said, you know what sucks? That the farmers don't know what day to plant their crop every year. If we made a calendar and kept track of when spring started, that would really make our lives easier. In other words, even the advent of the calendar isn't the start of civilization. There was a government before that. By the way, just for the record, the Egyptian calendar doesn't have leap years in it, so it's off by 0.24 years. It's actually 0.239, I think. So, in other words, you need to do a leap year every 4 years, but every 100 years you need to skip leap year, but every 1,000 years you need to go ahead and do the leap year you would have normally skipped. So in the year 2000 we were supposed to skip that leap year, but we weren't because it was the 1,000-year point, so that's why we went ahead and did it anyway. Really complicated, but a lot of fun. The ancient Egyptians, because they don't have that, their calendar is so old, they're off by 4 years. In other words, a way to think of it is the first day of spring has rotated through every single day of their calendar 4 times. So it's really the year 6,260, not 64. I'm bringing that up because what that meant then was farmers every 4 years had to actually move the date one day, right? Because the start of spring. And the Egyptians were like, people can keep track of that, let's just move on. This calendar will be too wonky and complicated otherwise. Egypt probably created government about 6,500 years ago. So civilization in Egypt is probably about 6,500 years old. We think that the Sumerians probably started government a couple of centuries later. So the Sumerians beat Egypt to writing, but the Egyptians beat Sumerians government, and the two of them were always really close to each other whenever there was a development. So it just kept, whoever was first, the other guy was second. Sumer and Egypt, they just kept flipping back and forth in developments. So another way to look at this is Egypt was conquered by the Romans in 31 BC. It was a pretty catastrophic event for you at every level. In part because the Romans were rough. To give you an idea what I mean by the Romans were rough, when Gaius Julius Caesar, the guy you incorrectly called Julius Caesar, his first name was Gaius, his last name was Julius. His name that modified his last name was Kaiser. Gaius Julius Kaiser. Julius is his actual last name. What type of Julius was he? He was the Kaiser Julius. That's how his name actually works. But anyway, so the guy that you guys incorrectly called Julius Caesar, when he conquered Gaul, today France, he killed 1 million of the Celtic population living in Gaul. There you go, how bad was that exactly? There were 3 million Gauls. He murdered 1/3 of the population. He enslaved another million. And then he turned and looked at the remaining million and went, welcome to the Roman Empire, Republic. Because they hadn't quite yet made it an empire. Right? That was the Roman way. Now the Romans varied in how cruel they were. So when they got to Dacia, they killed and enslaved everybody. In fact, they were so thorough about destroying Dacia, you don't know where Dacia is. It's effectively been erased from history. I'll tell you where it is. It's Romania. As in the Romans erased it from existence and then named it after themselves. And it still holds the new name. When the Romans conquered Egypt, they wanted to crush the Egyptian population. So they did things like they banned Egyptians from owning land. They banned Egyptians from riding horses. They banned Egyptians from doing anything but wearing the color blue. Egyptians had to always wear blue. And the Romans did this because they knew that the Egyptian population was going to be complicated to rule over. And then they were right. The Egyptians kept rebelling, so the Romans kept massacring them by mass crucifixions. Romans loved crucifixions, and they would just crucify whole segments of the Egyptian population. And then say, look, this is going to happen to you if you keep rebelling. And of course the Egyptians just kept rebelling. So if we decide that Egyptian civilization stopped abruptly in 31 BC, I'm happy to do that for purposes of this conversation. then by the time it got to 31 BC, Egypt's civilization was 4,000 years old.
فعندما احتل الرومان مصر في 31 قبل الميلاد كان عمر الحضارة المصرية 4000 عام.
Is when Alexander the Great
الإسكندر الأكبر
conquered Egypt
هزم مصر
and went to the pyramids
وذهب إلى الأهرامات
for the first time
لأول مرة
and gazed upon the pyramids.
وحدق في الأهرامات.
The Giza pyramids, which were not the oldest pyramids, like the Saqqara pyramids are the oldest pyramids. The Giza pyramids are 200 years younger. The Giza pyramids were 2,300 years old for him. So when he was looking at the pyramids, he was going, I can't believe this is 23 centuries old. That's so insanely ancient. He was 23 centuries ago. We are as far from Alexander the Great as the pyramids were from him.
يعني احنا نقطة هامة جدا ورائعة. يعني دلوقتي بيقول ايه ان المسافة بيننا دلوقتي في 2023 وبين الاسكندر الاكبر يعني حوالي 2300 سنة. زيها زي بالظبط لما الاسكندر الاكبر دخل مصر كان بينه وبين الاهرامات 2300 سنة قبله. يا مش ممكن.
Just to give you a little sense of
فقط
this.
لاعطاء قليل.
In other words,
بعبارة أخرى,
one lecture on Egypt
محاضرة واحدة عن مصر
seems probably inappropriate.
غير مناسبة على الأرجح.
One lecture on Mesopotamia probably seems like.
هيخصص محاضرة عن مصر بعد كده وقت. محاضرة واحدة عن بلاد ما بين النهرين ومحاضرة عن مصر.
A little too much. If you're admitting that's the founding of your civilization, that's a really strange thing. If you do this as an exercise, try to figure out your favorite musical instruments, all of them, and then look at who invented them. About 85–90% of the musical instruments on the planet today were invented by the ancient Egyptians. So if you're into music, like how can you ignore that? The rest were invented by Persians. Although the Mesopotamians invented the bagpipe. You want me to say that again? It wasn't the Celts. When the Celts were migrating through Mesopotamia, they heard the bagpipe and they went, oh, that is a nice sound. They grabbed it and took it across North Africa and then invaded Europe. One time I had a CD with bagpipe music, plugged it into my car. I had an Irish friend, Connor, and he was in the car with me, and I said, listen to this. And he's like, this is really strange bagpipe music. And I'm like, does it feel like Ireland? He goes, yeah, a little bit. It was Tunisian bagpipe music, because the Tunisians still play the bagpipe, because it never went away. So there are exceptions. But here's another way of thinking of this. The strangeness of the way the course is taught. It's the equivalent of doing this, having a course on English civilization. And then you're going to make it a 32-week course, because you're going to have a part 1 and a part 2. And of course, English civilization, if you take the moment that the Anglos and the Utes and the Saxons are invading Britain, we're talking about a 1400-year-old civilization. The point where the Anglos take over is not 1100 years ago. So I don't know, do you want to do the point where they invaded or the point where they conquered at? Pick one. Go with it. And then what you do is you cover the first part of English history all the way to 1776 in the first course. And then in the second course, You just, actually no, you wouldn't even cover it in the first, you would do English history in the first course, like the first maybe 2 weeks. And then the rest of the course, you just talk about the United States. You just do 30 weeks of U.S. history. And at the end, if somebody goes, wait a minute, I thought this was a course on English civilization, you go, we are England. We are English civilization. Well, I mean, yeah, we're a piece of English civilization gone rogue. But what about England? No, that's done. They don't do that anymore. They're not English. We're English. Do you see how weird this is? How could Western civilization have been born in Egypt and Iraq and then suddenly vanished after being there for thousands of years that you don't even deign to have a conversation about?
بهذه المحاضرة الغربية اللي
when Julius Caesar is massacring the Gauls, Egypt is already 4,000 years old.
عمر الحضارة المصرية 4000 سنة.
Right, Egypt had a civil war that won 170 years.
انتصرت فيها في 170 عاما.
The United States is what, 240, 230 something. Depending on, do you start with the Declaration of Independence or the moment the Constitution went into effect? I've never figured out which one I want. One of those two is right. Right? I mean, Egypt has a sneeze that lasted almost as long as the United States has been around. So that's another weirdness about the conversation that we're going to have tonight, is I need you to reframe the way you think about it. That this civilization that was birthed in the banks of the Tigris, the Euphrates, and the Nile can't possibly have stopped being there. But if you've been listening to the news lately, it gets really interesting. Because when Russia invaded Ukraine, all I hear now is Russia almost accepted Western culture. Russia almost accepted Western democracy. The West is supporting Ukraine. West is the old conversation from the Cold War, reborn again. So, we got to go back a little bit here before the Cold War to understand some terminology. When the English were conquering the world, when the English were making the world English, they didn't finish, obviously. They didn't finish. They got 40% done and they ran out of steam. But 40% is amazing. Think about it, that tiny, itty-bitty, teeny-weeny little island where they boil their steak and fry their tomatoes, where it's always raining, somehow conquered 40% of the planet. I still can't wrap my mind around it. They only ruled it for 200 years, but still. I don't know, I don't even know what to make of that. That's talent. There was talent there. I'm not denying the talent. Just incredible talent. A lot of it wasn't violence, right? The English would plant the flag. And the Indians are looking at it going, what is that? It's a flag. What does it do? It means we conquered you. And the Indians are like, oh, crap! You mean if we had gotten to your tiny little island and planted the Indian flag, we would have conquered you? And the English were like, yep. That's how this works. We got you. So there was a little bit of psyching him out, right? That was also going on. So, when the English had done this, they decided that they needed to make this idea of the East there needed to be this concept of the East, the other,
كان على الإنجليز
the nefarious, the sneaky, the mysterious, the strange. And so they came up with this idea of making the East being basically Asia, and then going from there. Now, the Romans had this a little bit, and the Greeks had this a little bit. So it wasn't that the English made it up completely from their own minds. For the Greeks, it was the Persians. For the Romans, it was still the Persians. And so the English kind of had, oh yeah, this worked really well for the Greeks and the Romans. We want to have this for ourselves. So what they did was they named the far end of Asia the Far East. They took the southern middle part of Asia and they called it the Middle East. And then they took the western end of Asia and they called it the Near East because it was near Europe. In other words, what we call the Middle East was the Near East. What we call South Asia was the Middle East. The Near East is what we call the Middle East today. What we call South Asia today was the Middle East. But then the Cold War started. And we Americans went, we can keep this East-West thing going, but now we need the Russians to be the East. Because the East is evil, and dangerous, and exotic, strange. So we'll make the Russians the new Near East. And we'll do the Eastern Bloc states as the new Near East. But if that's the Near East, then the Middle East can't be the Near East anymore. So we renamed the Near East the Middle East, but then we needed a new name for the old Middle East, so we named it South Asia in our new naming scheme. The Eastern Bloc states and the Soviet Union, it never caught. Nobody started calling that the Near East. But they did call it the East and the Eastern Bloc. In other words, it partially worked. It worked well enough. It got what they wanted. And now, in effect, what they had done was they had successfully divorced East Germany East from Western civilization in the minds of people. But this isn't the first time that somebody has divorced Western civilization from the minds of people. We had already done it to Egypt and Iraq. Right? I just got through showing you that the West was founded in Egypt and Iraq, and yet somehow we believe it's not in the West. In fact, even Middle Easterners will say it's not in the West. It's part of everybody's understanding of the world now. And this is, of course, at the heart of Orientalism, because the goal is to make it seem that the East is irrational. It's inefficient. It's authoritarian. And the West is democratic and liberated. And everybody's happy. It's all about ice cream. We build it into everything. So I don't know if you've ever watched The Man in the High Tower. It's probably not worth watching. The first season is. The first season was really, really amazing. But then after that, it kind of falls apart a little bit. And you could tell they just didn't know where to go. But it's about what would have happened if Japan and Germany had won World War II. And so it's really weird watching Americans walking around in SS uniforms. You know, goose stepping around. It's just like, oh God.
الراجل ده راجل مؤمن.
So the first season, the whole time you keep thinking, oh, this is horrific. Well, not to ruin the story at any for you in case you haven't seen it, but at one point there is a good Japanese, right? That's a fun trope. Good Japanese, bad Japanese, right? We do this all the time. Good Native American, bad Native American. That's how we It's Downton Abbey. Everybody upstairs is wonderful. Some of the people downstairs are wonderful, but some of the people downstairs are not wonderful. Because we all know there are good lower class people, there's some lower class people, but upper class people are all wonderful. Because the guy who wrote Downton Abbey, of course, is a member of the nobility, and so it's a giant propaganda piece. Just remember, also he villainizes gay people, which is interesting, and Americans like this show so much.
بيعمل ازاي؟ مستدعي الذاكرة بيركز.
I've lost my train of thought.
فقدت قطار تفكير. هو انا وصلت الفيلم الموضوع. لا يمكنك تعديل.
Near East, Middle East
نتكلم عن حول الشرق الأوسط.
And then why did I get into Downton Abbey?
وليه انا ده وصلت لموضوع الشرق الأوسط؟ ده الطالب اللي قدام بيشرح له ليه ايه اللي
Oh, I know it was the good Japanese, the bad Japanese. There we go. So okay, so there's this good Japanese guy, and he's trying to figure out the mess that they're in. Because the Japanese are controlling California and they can barely hold on to it. Things are falling apart. And
في هذه المحاضرة عند الدقيقة 34 و56 من هذه المحاضرة اللي هي ساعتين، يعني يبقى قدامنا 3-4 فيديوهات بالشكل ده من هذه المحاضرة بتاعة دكتور روي كاساجراندا. هنستكمل مع بعض إن شاء الله في أجزاء أخرى، لكن دي كانت مقدمة لأن دكتور روي كاساجراندا أستاذ التاريخ والفلسفة وعلم السياسة في الجامعة الأمريكية في أمريكا، بيتكلم عن التاريخ من حوالي 6000 سنة، الحضارة المصرية القديمة والحضارة السومرية العراقية القديمة، ودخل منهم للحضارة اليونانية والرومانية، ومنهم إلى العصور الوسطى، ومنهم إلى العصر الحديث، ومنهم إلى الحرب العالمية الأولى والحرب العالمية الثانية وأمريكا. أظن في الجزء اللي هيبقى بعد كده هيجيب سيرة بايدن وريجن وحاجات كتيرة جدا جدا في التاريخ علشان يعرفنا الأفعال المهولة اللي الغرب أحدثها في العالم، واللي لما جاء سيدنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والإسلام في أول القرون الوسطى يمكن سنة 630 ميلادية، كانت هذه هي لحظة الرحمة للحضارة العالمية. يا شوف التعبير اللي أنا بقوله ده، لحظة الرحمة للحضارة العالمية وللإنسانية عندما جاء رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بالإسلام. سيدنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اتولد أظن سنة 570 ميلادية. أنا برضو حافظ يعني زي الراجل ده حاجات كتير جدا يعني، وبقولها من دماغي، ولا قدامي دوكيومنت ولا وثيقة ولا فيديو ولا أي حاجة. الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم اتولد سنة 570 أو 71 ميلادية تقريبا يعني، وبعدين في سن 40 يبقى 70 و40 يعني 610 جاءته الرسالة. في هذه اللحظة المضيئة من تاريخ العالم جاءت إلى العالم الرحمة اللي هو الإسلام. فالإسلام أنقذ زي عنوان المحاضرة كده، أنقذ البشرية. أهو الحضارة العربية الإسلامية أنقذت العالم من براثن الحضارة الغربية المدمرة. هو قال إيه بقى؟ هو في عنوان المحاضرة قال How Islam saved Western civilization. كيف أن الإسلام اللي جاي سنة 610 ميلادي في أول العصور الوسطى هو الذي أنقذ الحضارة الغربية من الدماء والقتل وسفك الدماء والهدم والخراب والاحتلال وكل اللي انت عايز تقوله. هكتفي بهذا القدر دلوقتي من هذه المحاضرة، وإن شاء الله أستكمل في فيديوهات أخرى الجزء الثاني والثالث والرابع من هذه المحاضرة لدكتور روي كاساجراندا. أعتقد الراجل ده له أصول أسبانية ولا حاجة، لأن كاساجراندا ده أعتقد باللغة الأسبانية يعني. مش عايز أقول إن هو مسلم، لا ما أقدرش أقول كده، لأنه تقريبا لم يعلن إسلامه. وانا دورت على الويكيبيديا، في الويكيبيديا على شخصه ده زي ناس كتير قوي تلاقي الويكيبيديا جايبه بيانات عنها، فالحقيقه ما جبتش البيانات الشخصيه عنه، لان الويكيبيديا ما كتبتش لم تكتب لا بالعربيه ولا بالانجليزيه عن دكتور روي كاساجراندا. اكتفي بهذا القدر، وهذا الدكتور عبد الله البلتاجي يحييكم، وان شاء الله هذا الفيديو سوف يكون موجود على قناتي، قناة الدكتور عبد الله البلتاجي على اليوتيوب، وهجيبها برضو زي ما بعمل كل مرة، لأن هذه القناة قناة الدكتور عبد الله البلتاجي على اليوتيوب عليها حوالي أكتر من 550 فيديو في موضوعات كثيرة جدا 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 تهمك. وهو القناة قناة الدكتور عبد الله البلتاجي، معرفتك سر نجاحك، قناة ثقافية علمية دينية اجتماعية.
هذه كلمة ترحيب ورحب فيها
وده اللوجو بتاعنا، واشترك على القناة وفعل الجرس حيث تصلك فيديوهاتي. تحياتي، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. هذا الدكتور عبد الله البلتاجي. الاثنين
أراد الله سبحانه وتعالى أن أعد هذه القناة لكي أبث من خلالها أعمال هامة سواء شخصية لي أو أعمال
الذي جاء رحمة للعالمين. الكلام ده اللي قاله دكتور روي كاساجراندا،
وهي كلها أعمال دينية، القرآن الكريم،
ينقذ البشرية من براثن الحضارة الغربية المدمرة.
أعمال علمية، الإعجاز علمي عن العلوم